There is a scratch on the inner wall of box 7. Not a chisel mark, not a flaw in the grain. A scratch, fine, deliberate, and circular, tracing an arc so uniform that when I pressed a machinist's straight edge against it, the deviation was less than 2/10,000ths of an inch across a span of 9 feet. I did not come to Saqqara for the pharaohs. I did not come for Apis bulls or canopic jars or the endless liturgy of funerary rites that has been draped like a burial shroud over everything in this country. I came for that scratch, because that scratch is not a decoration. It is not symbolic. It is a tool path, and it belongs to a technology that, according to every textbook lining the shelves of every university on this planet, did not exist when these boxes were supposedly made. I want you to hold that thought. Not the history, not the date, the tolerance. 2/10,000ths of an inch, because that number is going to follow us down into the dark, and it is going to make the official story very, very uncomfortable. The Serapeum of Saqqara sits beneath the desert floor about a mile northwest of Djoser's Step Pyramid. It is an underground complex, a network of tunnels and vaulted chambers carved from the native limestone bedrock, stretching hundreds of meters in 2 principal galleries. The older gallery, sometimes called the Lesser Vaults, dates to the 18th dynasty, or perhaps earlier. The newer gallery, the Grand Gallery, is attributed to the reign of Ramesses II and subsequent pharaohs, extending through the late period, but attributions are easy. It costs nothing to assign a name to a wall. What costs something, what costs everything, is explaining what sits inside those chambers. 24 boxes. Some sources say 25. Enormous monolithic containers, each one carved from a single block of stone. Most are Aswan granite, rose granite, pink and gray, crystalline and extraordinarily hard, registering between 6 and 7 on the Mohs scale of mineral hardness. A few are carved from even more challenging materials: diorite, basalt, greywack. These boxes weigh, with their lids, in excess of 80 tons. Some estimates place individual boxes closer to 100 tons. The lids alone, flat, massive slabs, weigh upward of 30 tons each. And here is where the first fissure opens in the comfortable narrative. You are told these are sarcophagi. You are told they were commissioned by pharaohs to house the mummified remains of sacred Apis bulls, enormous animals worshipped as incarnations of the god Ptah. And perhaps bulls were placed inside some of them at a later date. I have no quarrel with that possibility. But the engineering of these boxes has nothing to do with burial. The precision applied to their construction is not funerary. It is industrial. And no one, not Auguste Mariette, who rediscovered the Serapeum in 1850, not any archaeologist since, has ever provided a satisfactory explanation for why a culture supposedly limited to copper, tools, stone pounders, and abrasive sand would manufacture a coffin for an animal to tolerances that rival modern CNC machining. Let me say that again, slowly. The interior surfaces of these granite boxes are flat to within a few 10,000ths of an inch. The interior corners meet at 90 degrees with a precision that, when you place a mirror flat against one wall, it reflects the adjacent surface without distortion. The parallelism between opposing interior faces, the degree to which two walls mirror each other in distance, angle, and plane, is consistent to a level that would challenge a modern granite fabrication shop equipped with diamond-tipped tooling laser interferometry, and computerized milling systems. These are not crude vessels. These are not rough-hewn troughs chipped out by an army of laborers. These are machined objects, and the material from which they are machined is one of the most punishing substances a toolmaker can encounter on this earth. I need to talk about granite because granite is the silent defendant in this entire case, and no one in mainstream archaeology seems willing to call it to the stand. Rose granite from the quarries at Aswan is an igneous rock composed primarily of quartz, feldspar, and mica, with a significant quartz content, sometimes exceeding 30%. Quartz has a Mohs hardness of 7. Copper, the material we are told was the cutting tool of the pyramid builders, has a Mohs hardness of 3. This is not a marginal difference. This is a categorical impossibility. You cannot cut quartz with copper for the same reason you cannot cut a diamond with a stick of butter. The physics refuse. The copper deforms. It mushrooms. It smears. It wears away at a rate so catastrophic that you would destroy hundreds of copper tools before you had removed a meaningful volume of granite. But they used abrasive sand, comes the reply. Yes, this is the standard patch applied to the wound whenever the copper chisel story starts bleeding. And it is true that if you introduce a hard abrasive quartz sand, corundum, emery, between a copper tool and a granite surface, you can, through a process of grinding and lapping, slowly abrade the stone. This is undeniable. It is also, when you examine the Serapeum boxes, utterly insufficient as an explanation. Here is why. To achieve the flatness documented inside these boxes, flatness measured and confirmed by independent researchers, including Christopher Dunn, a manufacturing engineer with decades of experience in aerospace machining, you need more than abrasion. You need control. You need a rigid, dimensionally stable tool that can maintain its geometry across the entire working surface as it removes material. If you use a copper plate loaded with sand to lap a granite surface, the copper plate itself deforms under the pressure and heat of the operation. It warps. It digs unevenly. It produces a surface that is wavy, concave, or otherwise irregular. To achieve the flatness these boxes exhibit, you need a reference surface, a master flat, that is harder and more stable than the workpiece. And you need a mechanical system that applies uniform pressure across the full stroke. In modern practice, this is done with cast iron lapping plates, diamond abrasives, and considerable patience. In the context of dynastic Egypt, it is done with nothing, because the tools that could accomplish this are absent from the archaeological record. There is a void where the machinery should be, and that void is the shape of the truth. Now, let's descend further. Let's go into the tunnels. The Grand Gallery of the Serapeum is not a casual excavation. It is a precisely cut corridor driven into the bedrock at a slight downward gradient, opening periodically into vaulted side chambers, alcoves really, each one sized to accept a single granite box. The ceiling height in places exceeds 6 meters. The width of the corridor is sufficient for the boxes to have been moved along its length, but barely. There are scrape marks on some of the walls where the passage of these enormous containers left their signature in the limestone. Pause here. Consider the logistics. You have an 80-ton granite box. It was quarried in Aswan, 600 miles to the south. It was transported. How exactly remains a matter of vigorous speculation. to Saqqara, where it then had to be maneuvered underground, down a sloping passage, around corners, and into a chamber with little more than a few feet of clearance on either side. The lid, a separate 30-ton slab, had to follow the same route and be placed atop the box with a precision that leaves no visible gap, a fit so close that in some cases you cannot insert a sheet of paper between the lid and the body. The modern analogy would be moving a fully loaded freight container through a subway tunnel and parking it in a room with 6 inches of clearance using no motorized equipment, no hydraulics, and no overhead cranes, and then sealing it with a lid that weighs as much as a loaded dump truck, aligned to within fractions of a millimeter. I am not being rhetorical. I am describing the physical constraints of the space, and I am asking the question that no guidebook asks: how? Not how in theory, not how with enough slaves and enough ramps and enough time. How specifically? What device, what mechanism, what system was used to lower a 100-ton assembly into a hole in the ground and achieve a precision fit in a space where you can barely turn around? Because lots of manpower is not an engineering answer. It is a placeholder. It is what you say when you do not have an engineering answer and you would prefer the question simply go away. Let me address the corners, because the corners are where the official story dies the quietest death. The interior corners of the Serapeum boxes, the junction where the floor meets the wall, or where 2 walls meet each other, are sharp, not rounded, not roughly chipped into an approximation of a right angle. Sharp, 90 degrees. And when I say sharp, I mean that independent measurements have documented these corners as meeting to within an angular precision that is, again, consistent with machine tooling. Think about what this means in practical terms. You are working inside a granite box. The interior volume is roughly 3 meters long, 1 meter wide, and 1.5 meters deep. You must remove all the material from within this space to a uniform depth, leaving walls of a consistent thickness, and you must bring those walls to a flatness and a mutual perpendicularity that would satisfy an industrial inspection report. And you must do this to the corners, the most difficult feature of any machined pocket, the place where tool access is most restricted and material removal is most challenging. In modern machining, internal corners are the bane of the process. A rotating tool, a milling cutter, a grinding wheel is circular. It cannot produce a true internal sharp corner because the geometry of the tool prevents it. To achieve a sharp corner, you must use a secondary prize, EDM, hand scraping, broaching, or a specially designed corner clearing operation. The fact that the Serapeum boxes exhibit sharp internal corners means either the makers used a non-rotational material removal process of extraordinary precision, or they used tooling and techniques that we have not identified and cannot replicate with confidence using the technology we attribute to their era. Either way, the copper chisel and sand abrasive model fails. It doesn't fail partially. It doesn't fail at the margins. It fails categorically in the way a paper airplane fails to cross the Atlantic. The gap between the proposed tool and the documented result is not a gap of degree. It is a gap of kind. And then there is the question of light. The Serapeum is deep underground. The tunnels have no natural light source. The chambers are enclosed. And yet, the interior surfaces of these granite boxes were finished, polished in some cases to a near-optical flatness. To accomplish this, the workers needed to see what they were doing. They needed consistent, sustained illumination inside a confined space, deep within a subterranean corridor, for what must have been weeks or months of meticulous finishing work. The standard explanation for illumination in ancient Egyptian underground spaces is oil lamps or tallow candles. These produce light, yes. They also produce soot, carbon residue, a fine, greasy black deposit that clings to ceilings and walls with a tenacity that survives millennia. We see it in tombs, we see it in mines, we see it in every ancient underground space where combustion-based lighting was used. We do not see it in the Serapeum. The ceilings of the Serapeum chambers do not exhibit the soot deposits that would be expected from prolonged use of oil lamps or torches. This has been noted by multiple visitors and researchers over the years, and it remains unexplained within the conventional framework. If you spent 6 months finishing the interior of a granite box by lamplight in an unventilated underground chamber, the ceiling above your workspace would be black. It would be irrefutably, permanently stained with the byproduct of your light source. And it is not. So either the finishing work was done elsewhere, which raises the impossible question of how a finished 90-ton precision object was transported and installed without damaging its surfaces, or the light source used in the Serapeum did not involve combustion. There is no third option that satisfies the evidence. And the second option, non-combustible illumination in a structure attributed to the Bronze Age, is a sentence that most Egyptologists would prefer not to say out loud. I want to be precise about what I am not saying. I am not saying aliens built the Serapeum. I am not saying Atlanteans or time travelers or interdimensional beings were involved. These are the caricatures that are deployed whenever someone raises uncomfortable engineering questions about ancient structures, and they serve a very specific purpose: to discredit the question by associating it with absurdity. It is a rhetorical sleight of hand. You ask about tolerances, and you are answered with ridicule. What I am saying is simpler and, I think, far more disturbing. I am saying that the Serapeum boxes are physical evidence of a manufacturing capability that does not fit within the accepted technological timeline of human civilization. I am saying that the precision, the material selection, the scale, and the logistical execution of these objects demand a technology base that is either absent from the archaeological record or has been systematically misidentified as something else. And I am saying that the response of institutional archaeology to this evidence has not been to investigate it, but to label it. Ceremonial, symbolic, funerary. These are not explanations, they are classifications. They tell you what category the object has been assigned to. They tell you nothing about how it was made. And in the hierarchy of questions that matter, how was this made outranks what was this used for by an order of magnitude, because the answer to the first question defines the boundary of what a civilization was capable of, while the answer to the second question is, at best, an educated guess projected backward through thousands of years of cultural assumption. The Serapeum boxes are not ritual objects that happen to be well made. They are precision-engineered artifacts that happen to have been appropriated for ritual use. The distinction is everything. Consider the unfinished obelisk at Aswan. It lies in its quarry, still partially attached to the bedrock, abandoned, we are told, because of a crack that developed during extraction. And it is enormous, over 40 meters long, weighing an estimated 1,200 tons. It is shown to tourists as evidence of ancient quarrying techniques. Look, the guides say, you can see the pounding marks, you can see how they worked. And yes, you can. There are pounding marks. There are channels beaten into the stone by dolerite balls, a technique that is well documented and entirely real. No one disputes this. But the unfinished obelisk is not a Serapeum box. The pounding marks at Aswan are the marks of rough extraction, of separating bulk material from bedrock. They are not the marks of finishing, of surfacing, of achieving sub-millimeter flatness on a crystalline igneous rock. They are the marks of Phase 1, and the Serapeum boxes are the product of Phase 50. The distance between those two phases is the distance between felling a tree and building a violin, and no amount of pointing at the tree stump will explain the violin. This is the sleight of hand that is performed constantly in popular Egyptology. You are shown the crude work, the quarry marks, the ramp remnants, the copper tools in museum cases, and you are asked to extrapolate from that crude work to the finished product. You are asked to accept that the gap between rough stone and mirror-flat granite is bridged by skill and patience. But skill and patience are not tools. They are human qualities applied through tools, and the tools that could bridge this gap are not copper chisels. They are not dolerite pounders. They are something else, something with rigidity, with geometric control, with power. Something that has either been destroyed, buried, repurposed beyond recognition, or, and this is the possibility that haunts me most, something that was never made of materials durable enough to survive in the archaeological record. If the tooling was organic, if it was wooden, or composed of materials that decompose, if the mechanism, whatever it was, did not survive the millennia the way stone and metal do, then we would expect exactly what we find: finished products of extraordinary precision and no trace of the means by which they were produced. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but the presence of the product is evidence of the process, and the process was not primitive. I have spent many hours in the Serapeum, not as a tourist, not with a camera crew or a television deadline, alone or nearly alone, with a flashlight and a straight edge and a notebook. And what strikes me every time is not the spectacle of the place, not the vast tunnels, not the intimidating mass of the boxes, but the silence of it, the silence of the evidence. These boxes do not shout. They do not proclaim. There are no inscriptions on most of them, a fact that, by itself, is deeply anomalous in a culture that inscribed everything. The few that bear hieroglyphs show signs of later addition, crudely applied in comparison to the precision of the boxes themselves, like a child's crayon drawing on the surface of a surgical instrument. The boxes were not made for inscription. They were not made for display. They were made for function. And that function, whatever it was, required a degree of geometric perfection that serves no ceremonial purpose whatsoever. You do not polish the inside of a coffin to optical flatness. You do not machine the corners of a burial vault to 90 degrees within arc. Seconds of perfection. You do not transport 100 tons of granite 600 miles and lower it into a tunnel if the point is simply to enter a dead animal, no matter how sacred. The effort is disproportionate. The precision is disproportionate. The material choice is disproportionate. Everything about the Serapeum boxes is disproportionate to the explanation offered, and proportionate only to a purpose we have not yet identified. I think about this often, about the nature of forgetting. We assume that technological progress is linear. that we today represent the pinnacle of human capability, and that everything before us was a slow, steady climb from ignorance to knowledge. This assumption is not supported by the evidence. It is supported by our pride. The archaeological record is riddled with discontinuities, moments where capability appears fully formed, without the expected developmental sequence, and then vanishes. The Serapeum is one such discontinuity. The precision of the boxes appears without precedent in the Egyptian record, and without successor. It is an island of capability in an ocean of cruder work. And when we encounter such an island, we have two choices. We can investigate it honestly, following the evidence wherever it leads, accepting that our model of the past may be incomplete or incorrect, or we can explain it away, folding it into the existing narrative with labels and assumptions that preserve our comfort but betray the evidence. For over a century, we have chosen the second path. We have called these boxes sarcophagi. We have said apis bulls and funerary cult and symbolic significance, and we have moved on because moving on is easier than standing still in the dark and admitting that we do not know, that we do not know how, that we do not know why, that the precision exists and it mocks our timeline, and we have no answer that does not require us to rethink something fundamental about who we were. I said at the beginning that I came for a scratch, a 2-millimeter arc on the inner wall of a granite box, so fine and so uniform that it could only have been left by a tool moving under mechanical control, not a hand holding a rock, not a laborer with a copper blade. A tool guided by a system, cutting stone with the cold regularity of a machine. That scratch is still there. It will be there long after the guidebooks have been rewritten, long after the labels have been changed, long after the comfortable story has been quietly retired. Because granite does not lie, granite does not revise, granite holds the truth of its own making with a patience that is, frankly, more than human. The Serapeum of Saqqara is not a mystery because we lack information. It is a mystery because the information we have contradicts the story we have chosen to tell. And the resolution of that contradiction will not come from another hieroglyph translated, another tomb opened, another dynasty cataloged. It will come from an engineer, from someone who looks at the stone not as a historian but as a manufacturer, from someone who asks not, "What does this mean?" but "What made this mark?" The mark is the message, the precision is the proof, and the silence of the Serapeum is not the silence of an empty tomb. It is the silence of a machine that has been turned off for so long that we have forgotten it was ever running.